All right, let's dive into a completely different way of thinking about plant health. Forget about spraying poisons after disease shows up. Today we're talking about how to build a biological fortress so strong that pathogens can't even get a foothold in the first place. So let's just start with this big question. What if, instead of constantly reacting to attacks, you could proactively engineer a plant's defenses? I mean, what if you could make its leaves physically impenetrable to all those common airborne diseases like powdery mildew, blight, and rust? It's a huge shift in thinking.
And this slide really gets to the core of it. We're stepping away from that whole war metaphor, with fungicides and pesticides. The goal here is to become an architect, to help the plant build a living biological fortress that can defend itself.
Okay, so to build a solid defense, you've got to understand the attack, right? So how does a fungal pathogen actually get inside a leaf? It's not some brute force thing. It's more like a precision chemical operation.
The pathogen's weapon of choice is something called pectolytic enzymes. You can just think of them as a microscopic chemical drill. When those fungal spores land on a leaf, they secrete these enzymes to literally dissolve the cell wall, which creates the perfect entry point for an infection.
But here's the crucial part. This attack isn't a sure thing. That fungal drill, it needs two specific conditions to work. First, moisture on the leaf surface to get going, and second, a weak, easy-to-penetrate cell wall. And those are the two vulnerabilities we can totally architect out of the system.
And that brings us right to our first line of defense, the castle wall. We're going to help the plant build a physical barrier that makes its leaf surface basically impregnable. And the coolest part? The plant does all the construction itself. This really illustrates that key shift in philosophy. We are not applying a fungicide that acts like a poison. Instead, we're giving the plant the raw materials it needs to build its very own physical armor, a defense system that's completely natural to its biology. So what is this armor exactly? Well, we call it the Lipid Shield. You know that glossy, waxy layer you see on really healthy leaves? That's it. When a plant has enough extra energy, it stores it as lipids, or fats, right there on its leaf surface. This waxy cuticle is so dense, it's physically impenetrable to those fungal enzymes. The drill it can't get a grip. So, how thick does this armor need to be? This chart lays it out perfectly. You see, a typical vulnerable plant has a lipid concentration of maybe 1.5 to 2%. Our goal is to more than double that, pushing it into the 4 to 6% range. Once you hit that level, the lipid shield is fully functional.
Now, to build this shield, we have to give the plant the right building blocks. And it turns out hemp seeds are the perfect source. They have the ideal ratio of omega-3, 6, and 9 fatty acids. They're like the exact prefabricated bricks the plant needs. And by giving them directly, you save the plant a ton of energy, which it can then use for growing bigger and producing more fruit.
But there's a catch. Those lipid bricks are big, heavy molecules. You can't just spray them on the leaf and hope for the best. You need a way to get them inside. This is where fulvic acid comes in. Think of it as the master key. It's this natural compound with a really small molecular weight, so it can basically unlock the plant's cell membranes and act like a little delivery truck, hauling those heavy lipids right into the leaf tissue where they can build the shield.
Okay, so we've built the castle wall, and it's strong and impenetrable. But what about the grounds outside the wall? Well, that brings us to our second layer of defense, a living biological police force that constantly patrols the leaf's surface. So, meet our Microbial Police force, potato LAB. This is a very specific culture of lactic acid bacteria. It's not made from rice or dairy, but from potato skins. And its dominant strain is something called Lactobacillus plantarum, which is perfectly adapted to live on a plant's surface and is incredibly good at suppressing fungal spores.
And this comparison here shows exactly why Potato Lab is the right tool for this job. Its dominant strain, L. plantarum, is literally plant-adapted and it feeds on starch. On the other hand, the standard LAB you might see is usually dominated by bacteria adapted for animal guts that feed on milk sugar. So for protecting a leaf, the choice is pretty clear.
So how does this work? Again, it's not a poison. It's a strategy of competitive exclusion. When you spray Potato Lab, you're colonizing the leaf surface with a massive population of good bacteria. They create a slightly acidic environment, and they just plain crowd out the pathogenic spores, making the leaf completely uninhabitable for them. The invasion is stopped before it even has a chance to start.
All right, we have the wall, we have the police. Now let's put it all together into a simple, actionable protocol. This is how you actually become the architect of your plant's immunity.
Building the lipid shield is a pretty straightforward three-step process. First, you create your lipid extract by fermenting crushed hemp seeds. Second, you combine that extract with our master key, fulvic acid, to make sure it gets inside the plant. And third, you apply it as a foliar spray, but only at dusk. This is really important. It prevents the oils from burning the leaves in the bright sun. And next, it's time to deploy your security team. You just spray the leaf surfaces with your potato LAB culture, diluted at a ratio of 1 part LAB to 500 parts water. And that's it. You've created a living, protective microbial layer right on top your brand new physical armor.
So you've done it. You've followed the protocol. You've applied the armor. You've deployed the police. But how do you know if it actually worked? How can you really tell if you've successfully built the fortress?
I mean, this is the most important question, isn't it? You need a clear, unmistakable sign that the plant's defenses are up and running. And, luckily, there's a very, very simple visual test you can do.
This slide shows it perfectly. It's called the water bead test. About 24 hours after you apply the shield, just go out and spray the leaves with some plain water. If the water forms these tight little spherical beads that just roll right off, like on a freshly waxed car, you've done it. The lipid shield is functional. If the water just sheets out and wets the leaf, the shield isn't complete yet, and that plant is still vulnerable. It is really that simple.
This quote it says it all, doesn't it? It reframes the entire approach. Disease isn't something you poison after the fact, it's just a symptom of a weak defense. By building the lipid shield, you make the leaf surface a food desert for pathogens. They land, they realize they can't get in, and they simply starve.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. This whole principle of building proactive, systemic immunity instead of just fighting symptoms, well, that's a fundamental pattern in nature. So what other areas in health, in agriculture, maybe even in our own lives could be totally transformed by shifting from that reactive mindset to an architectural one? Thanks for joining us.